The story takes place in a world where a volcano erupted in the distance, sending fire and smoke into the sky. The ground shook, and the forest trembled. From within the trees, a large dinosaur slowly turned its head. Drool dripped from its mouth as it sensed something approaching. Not far away, 3 explorers moved carefully through the forest. They held their weapons tightly and stepped forward with caution. The sound of the creature's movements made them stop and look around. Then a shadow fell over them. A huge, terrifying beast stood behind one of the men. Its eyes glowed red, and its sharp teeth formed a twisted smile. The man turned slowly, sweat running down his face, realizing that the creature was right behind him. The creature let out a loud roar and charged forward. The 2 hunters stood their ground, gripping their weapons tightly. They moved in quickly, trying to block and strike, but the monster's strength was overwhelming. The beast raised its body high and opened its huge jaws, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Its roar shook the air, and one of the hunters staggered back in fear. The creature rushed at them with wild force. At that moment, the young man with dark hair stepped forward. His expression became calm, and his eyes sharpened. A blue light gathered around his head, glowing like a rising star. Blue energy wrapped around the young man's body as he dashed forward. His movement was fast, like a streak of light. With one clean strike, his blade cut through the monster's flesh. Blood splashed across the ground. The beast roared in pain and swung its claw, but the young man had already moved again. He jumped to the side, landed, and took his stance. The creature tried to attack once more, but its body was already crumbling. Large wounds appeared across its chest and neck, and its strength faded. With one final swing, the young man ended it. The monster collapsed, shaking the ground as it fell. Blood spread across the grass, and the forest grew silent. The young man stood in the middle of the battlefield, holding his sword. A red aura rose behind him, making his figure look powerful and unshaken. This was the promotional video that appeared on the screen, encouraging people to become a dispatch and take a step toward their bright future. Our protagonist stood below, watching quietly. His eyes were wide, filled with surprise and curiosity. He had never imagined something like this. He took a small breath. Something in his heart stirred. Just as he was thinking about that new path, someone suddenly spoke behind him. A hand grabbed his shoulder. He flinched in surprise. The old man from the workplace stood there, looking annoyed. He asked our protagonist why he was standing around instead of working. Our protagonist was startled, realizing he had been caught daydreaming. The old man sighed and shook his head. He complained that young people these days always got lost in strange dreams and fantasies. Our protagonist bowed deeply, apologizing over and over again. The old man clicked his tongue and pointed toward the overgrown vines nearby. He told our protagonist to hurry and clean them up. The young man quickly ran to do it. Holding his small tool tightly, his face was embarrassed, but inside, the image of the heroic warrior still burned in his mind. Even while working, he couldn't stop thinking, wondering if that future could really become reality. However, this was not the time to think about this. He realized he was already getting scolded on his very first day of work. His hands tightened around the tool as worry filled his face. The old man continued talking in the background, saying how things were different back in his day, and how they never needed anyone to tell them what to do. They simply worked hard on their own. Our protagonist's expression grew tense. He had already been fired from jobs before. He couldn't let that happen again. He couldn't lose this job too. Determined not to lose his job, our protagonist began cutting the vines with all his strength. His arms moved fast, and the sound of chopping filled the air. He swung again and again, clearing the plants much quicker than expected. The old man watched from behind. At first he was ready to scold him again, but then he froze. The vines were disappearing at an unbelievable speed. Leaves flew everywhere, scattering across the road as the young man worked like his life depended on it. The old man blinked in surprise and let out a small sigh. Now impressed, he nodded with satisfaction. He praised the young man, saying it was rare to see someone work so hard nowadays. The young man lifted the heavy bags of vines onto his shoulder and began carrying them away. His clothes were dirty, his hands were tired, and sweat rolled down his neck, but he kept moving. As he walked, his eyes slowly lowered. Dispatch. The word echoed quietly in his mind. He wondered if that kind of future was something he could ever reach. The heroic dream he saw felt distant, like a world meant for someone else entirely. The world began to fall apart. Cities that were once full of life now stood silent and cracked. Roads were broken, buildings leaned in ruin, and the sky hung heavy with stillness. The planet had lost its strength. It was said that Earth was already doomed. Like a game whose service had ended, the world's life force had drained away. Vegetation spread unchecked through cities, and many people lived in despair, struggling simply to survive. During this time, an unknown higher being presented a single solution: a path to another world. This plan was called dispatch. It allowed chosen individuals to be sent to other worlds, places where power could be obtained, where resources could be found, and where humanity might recover what it had lost. Dispatch became humanity's last chance. Heroes who traveled to other worlds became known as dispatchers. They fought, survived, and gathered a mysterious energy called life force. The life force they returned with was the only thing keeping Earth alive. Watching them on screens across the city, our protagonist stood in silence, holding a heavy sack over his shoulder. He wondered if one day he could also become a dispatcher. As the day ended, the young man walked through a narrow street, his steps slow and tired. The evening light stretched long shadows across the cracked pavement. His head hung slightly, showing quiet exhaustion. He wondered if they would call him to work tomorrow, or if he had to find another job. Thinking about this, he went to the dispatch reunion center. He soon reached a building. He paused in front of the entrance and noticed many people were there today as well. Inside, the building was crowded. People stood shoulder to shoulder, all waiting for their turn. The young man tried to move through the tight space, carefully slipping between others while offering small apologies. Everyone seemed tense, desperate, and tired of waiting. After a slow struggle through the crowd, his turn finally came. He stood in front of the counter. The staff member, an older man with glasses, typed quietly on a keyboard while checking the records. The staff member looked up and asked our protagonist if he was Mr. Oh Chansu. Chansu nodded and asked the staff member if there had been any updates on the ongoing investigation. The staff member looked through the account and showed that the amount he had paid to search for his family was insufficient. The staff member looked at him with a tired expression and spoke in a calm voice. He told Chansu, "This place doesn't run on hope alone. The investigation requires funds." He explained that the payment was not enough to continue. The search could not move forward. The staff member gestured lightly and advised him to prepare the remaining cost, then come back. After that, he called the next person. Chansu stood there, frozen for a moment. His eyes trembled. He asked the staff member if he could at least get some news about his family members, like a small clue or just the location of the world they were dispatched to. But before he could even ask more, suddenly a bold fat man pushed him away, telling him that he was not the only one with problems. There were many waiting in line. As night fell, the building lights flickered on. Chansu walked away slowly, exhausted both in body and heart. The night air felt cold. Nearby, more people argued over who had arrived first, each one trying to secure a chance, just one chance to save someone they cared about. Chansu came back home and stepped inside quietly. He looked tired as he lifted one foot to remove his shoe, holding a small shopping bag in his hand. With a soft voice, he said that he had returned. When Chansu was young, he often played outside. He remembered how he used to kick a soccer ball under the warm sunlight. Back then, his father stood with him. His father was someone strong and important, a top-tier returner. But as time passed, things on Earth became more dangerous. Because of that, Chansu's father was called away once again to fight. Chansu remembered playing together in the open field. He held the soccer ball with a bright smile, waiting for his father to return so they could continue. However, in the end, his father never came back. The young Chansu stood alone under the empty sky, holding the ball tightly. After his father didn't return, his mother gently held his hands. She told him that she would go and find his father and bring him back. She said he only needed to sleep alone for a few days and wait patiently. Chansu listened, trying to understand, his eyes filled with worry and confusion. However, she also didn't return. That was the moment Chansu's life changed. From then on, he grew up alone. Now sitting quietly in the dim room, he lowered his head and held his hands together. The memories of his parents felt distant, like they were slipping further away with time. He realized that even the faces of his father and mother were starting to fade from his mind. He tried to remember, but the images were blurry, almost gone. Just then, a bright light burst through the window. Chansu lifted his head in shock, his eyes wide. He hurried to the window, confused by what was happening outside. The sky glowed with blinding light, and loud rumbling sounds shook the air. Chansu leaned out to see better, his heart racing. Then, an enormous explosion of golden light spread across the city, lighting everything up at once. The blast of light hit the building with force. Chansu was thrown backward, his body sliding across the floor. He screamed in shock as he lost his balance. His back slammed against the wall, the sound echoing loudly. Everything shook around him. The world turned into noise and brightness. Then, everything went dark. He got unconscious. After a while, Chansu slowly opened his eyes. He lay on the floor, feeling weak and confused. A soft groan escaped his lips as he tried to sit up. His head throbbed as if it was splitting in two. He held his head and tried to steady his breathing. Then, his phone vibrated across the floor. On the screen, a news alert appeared. Strong winds and flashes were caused by the aftershock of an S-rank returner. And the S-rank returner A has announced retirement. Chansu stared in shock. He looked at the news on his phone trying to understand what was happening. The broadcast explained the situation. During the latest mission, the top-ranked returner and his team had faced something overwhelming. In the end, the returner had been unable to protect the being they were assigned to defend, and every dispatcher who went with him had been lost. He was the only one who was forced to return alive. Because of this, he had lost both the ability and the qualification to continue going on dispatch missions. On the screen, the injured S-rank returner stood before reporters, his arm in a sling, his expression heavy with guilt and exhaustion. Cameras flashed around him as he announced his decision. After everything that had happened, he had chosen to retire. He asked the world to understand. Chansu watched in silence, absorbing the weight of the moment. The message continued to play on Chansu's screen. The voice of the retired returner sounded weak yet sincere. He was asking the world for one last request. He begged everyone to protect Earth and to never lose courage. Chansu's hands tightened around his phone. The screen reflected in his eyes, filled with worry and disbelief. The news continued to show headlines. Returners disappearing. Dispatchers gone. Global population falling below 500 million. Experts fear that new returners may no longer appear. The world was changing. Just then, a small sound echoed from outside, a light tap, like someone knocking on his door. Chansu lifted his head slightly, surprised, wondering at such a late hour, who would come to see him. Chansu slowly stood up and walked toward the dark hallway. The room was quiet, the floor cool beneath his feet. He looked confused, unsure of what he had just heard. There was no reason for anyone to visit him. He had no friends, no family, no one who would come to see him at this hour. But as he opened the door, a small rabbit greeted him. The rabbit politely asked if Mr. O Chansu was there. However, Chansu didn't hear the white rabbit's voice, and when he looked outside the door, he saw that there was no one. He blinked, wondering if it was some kind of joke or hallucination. But the rabbit looked at him again and told him to look down. The moment Chansu responded, the rabbit suddenly rushed toward him with surprising speed. Startled, Chansu stumbled backward and fell to the floor. The rabbit didn't seem bothered at all. It simply looked down at him, still holding the tablet, and asked again, very confidently, if he was Mr. O Chansu. Chansu's eyes went wide, his breath caught in his throat. His mind stopped for a second. He could not believe he was seeing a talking rabbit. He stared in shock, unable to process what he was seeing. The rabbit raised its voice gently, trying to calm him down. It said that it had come with good news, important news. Chansu froze, still overwhelmed, but the rabbit continued without hesitation. With a bright smile, the rabbit lifted the tablet and proudly announced that Chansu had been selected. He had officially been selected to become a dispatcher. Chansu looked shocked. His eyes were wide, and sweat ran down the side of his face. He stepped back slightly and asked in disbelief what the little rabbit had just said. He couldn't understand it at all. In his mind, he wondered how any of it made sense. The little rabbit spoke calmly, as if he understood the situation. He said that it was natural for him to feel confused, but no matter how confusing things seemed, Chansu had been chosen. The rabbit held out a card from something called the World Dispatch Support Center as proof. Then it calmly asked if Chansu wanted to move to another place, in case he was still unsure or suspicious. As they walked down a long glowing hallway, the rabbit asked Chansu if he had any special talents. Chansu repeated the words quietly, unsure. The rabbit explained that most people usually have at least one talent. Chansu walked beside the rabbit, feeling uncertain. He then mentioned that he himself was not eligible to be sent out for dispatch. The only thing he was really good at was trimming trees and flowers. He didn't believe he had any special skill beyond that. To him, it didn't seem like something that could be called a real talent. The rabbit suddenly looked shocked, its eyes wide and full of disbelief. With surprise and frustration, seeing him like that, Chansu wondered if the rabbit didn't know about that. The rabbit took a breath and tried to relax again. It told Chansu that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. With a small smile, it said that there must be a reason for all of this. The rabbit reassured Chansu, telling him that being chosen had not changed. There was no need for him to worry. Hearing those words, Chansu relaxed a little and scratched the back of his head. He softly thanked the rabbit for saying that. However, he still couldn't believe that he was really going to the dispatch center. For a long time he thought he didn't have any chance at all, but now he felt that his moment had finally arrived. The rabbit suggested that they should go inside to continue talking. Chansu looked ahead, his eyes wide with anticipation. Chansu and the rabbit stood in front of a massive door. The door was so tall and wide that it made both of them look small in comparison. Chansu stared up at it in amazement, unable to believe how large it was. Chansu reached out and tried to open the huge door. He believed that the dispatch center was waiting for him on the other side. However, no matter how hard he pushed, the door didn't move at all. He struggled with all his strength, but it stayed completely still. Chansu stared at it in confusion, wondering why it wouldn't open. While Chansu struggled with the huge door, the rabbit watched him from behind. The rabbit asked him what he was doing, since that door was never meant to open. Then, the rabbit pointed calmly to the side and told him that the entrance was actually somewhere else. Chansu looked at the spot the rabbit pointed to, confused. He asked if that was really the entrance. The rabbit calmly replied that it was indeed the correct entrance, and asked if there was anything wrong with it. Chansu stared at the entrance, which was extremely small. He panicked and shouted, asking how he was supposed to fit through something that tiny. The rabbit, however, slipped through easily and said that it fit just fine. Chansu pointed out in frustration that the rabbit could do that only because it was a rabbit. Chansu sighed in disappointment. He couldn't believe he had expected anything different. Feeling frustrated, he turned around and said that he was going home. However, before he left, the little rabbit asked him if he was really sure about leaving now. It reminded Chansu of his past. Chansu had taken many tests before, but he failed all of them. Because of that, he was judged as someone who could not be dispatched. Hearing those words, Chansu's expression dimmed. The rabbit then asked him if he really believed a chance like this would ever come again. The rabbit spoke gently, trying not to sound harsh. It told Chansu not to misunderstand what was being said. The rabbit explained that it was only repeating Chansu's own words back to him, words he had said in the past. The rabbit continued speaking calmly. It said that it was a shame Chansu had decided to go home. Chansu stood quietly, unable to respond. The rabbit reminded him that being chosen had not been easy. It had taken great effort and difficulty. Hearing those words, Chansu agreed and followed the little rabbit. But inside his mind he questioned himself, wondering what he was even doing there anymore. He didn't know what to think or what to decide. Just then, they reached the dispatch center. The rabbit, standing outside the entrance, called out to Chansu, telling him to hurry. Chansu tried to keep up, saying he was going as fast as he could. But when he lifted his head, Chansu stepped inside and looked around. He was surprised to see that the room looked very ordinary, almost like a regular office. It was much more normal than he expected. Just as Chansu was looking around, the rabbit looked at him and mentioned something surprising. It said that there was a world that was especially suited for him, a world perfect for someone like him. Chansu's eyes widened. He asked if different worlds existed for different kinds of people. The rabbit happily explained that the world was called block-type territory capture. It even held up a sign showing that a big summoning event in that world was currently happening. When Chansu heard the name of the world, he reacted with surprise, repeating it loudly. The rabbit looked at him curiously and asked if he already knew about it. Chansu quickly shook his head. He said it was his first time hearing the name and nervously asked if the place was strange. The rabbit narrowed its eyes. It wondered why Chansu acted like he recognized it in the first place. The rabbit laughed when it realized Chansu really didn't know. It explained that the world it mentioned was very popular right now. It said that this world had a special benefit. It was protected by a god. Chansu listened quietly, taking in the information. Just then, the mention of a god made him remember something. He recalled seeing news about an S-rank returner who returned from another world and also served a god. He grew a bit uneasy. But the rabbit quickly cleared things up. It told him that this world had nothing to do with those recent problems, so he didn't need to worry. Chansu thought for a moment and then asked about the god the rabbit mentioned. He wanted to know exactly which god was involved in that world. The rabbit explained that normally the god a person receives is chosen randomly. But if Chansu made his decision right now, things could be different. The rabbit suddenly raised its arm, and countless shining cards scattered into the air around them. With a confident tone, the rabbit spoke. It said that, just this once, Chansu would be allowed to choose the god himself instead of getting one assigned at random. The rabbit spread the cards in its hand and looked at Chansu with a confident smile. It asked him what he wanted to do and if he was ready to choose. Chansu stared at the cards in confusion. He didn't know anything about the gods or which one might be better. He didn't even know where to start. Inside, he felt lost. He wondered how he was supposed to make a choice when he didn't understand any of it. The rabbit looked at Chansu seriously and reminded him that this situation was rare. It said that being able to choose like this was a special chance that almost never happened. Chansu stood there quietly, unsure and tense. The rabbit asked again if he understood how important this moment was. Chansu thought about what the rabbit said. He realized it was true. Opportunities like this didn't come often. He remembered his past, the times he had dreams and tried hard to reach them. He had already lost so many chances before. As those memories passed through his mind, he asked himself why he was hesitating now. He wondered why he was acting unsure when this might be his only chance to change his life. Chansu finally reached out and grabbed one of the cards. His voice shook as he said that he would choose this one. But the moment he took it, a strange energy burst out. Dark smoke swirled around him, and skeleton-like figures appeared, reaching toward him from the shadows. A glowing card appeared in front of him, showing the name of the god he had chosen, God of Negation. Chansu stared at it, stunned and confused, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. Chansu nervously asked if he could choose again. He looked embarrassed, scratching his cheek while avoiding eye contact. The rabbit responded cheerfully, saying it was no problem at all. Hearing that, Chansu let out a sigh of relief and thanked it. However, no matter how many times he chose, he always got the same card. Chansu tried again, this time with full determination. He shouted that he would definitely get a better one now. But when he flipped the card over, he froze. The same dark symbol appeared again. Chansu let out a scream of frustration. He couldn't believe he picked the same one again. Chansu became frustrated and yelled, thinking something was wrong. He couldn't understand how he kept drawing the same god every single time. He pointed at the rabbit angrily, calling it a scam. The rabbit calmly explained that there was nothing wrong with the cards. Chansu froze for a moment. He quickly said he didn't mean the cards were the problem, but inside he felt uneasy. He wondered why the rabbit suddenly looked so serious. The light-hearted atmosphere from before had completely disappeared. Just then, the rabbit held out the cards again, but this time its expression was different. There was no playfulness anymore. It told Chansu that this would be his last chance, and asked him to choose carefully. Chansu covered his face with one hand, his expression desperate. He reached out with the other hand toward the cards, trembling. In his mind, he begged with all his strength. He didn't care what god he chose anymore, as long as it wasn't the god of negation again. His heart pounded hard. As he finally picked the card, time seemed to slow around him. All he could do was hope. Just then, a soft green light burst out as the card was drawn, petals swirling around him like a gentle wind. The glow wrapped around Chansu's hand, brighter and warmer than before. Chansu opened his eyes wide in shock as he stepped back, his voice trembling with confusion. His face lit up with hope and pure relief. He held the card tightly with both hands. He finally felt like he had gotten something different. Something good. Chansu slowly looked at the card he had drawn. On it was the title, Goddess of Abundance. With a success rate so tiny, it was almost zero. He stared at it, surprised. He really did get something rare. But when he read the description, the effect seemed small and not impressive. Even so, he couldn't deny it. The chance of getting this card was unbelievably low. It was super rare, no matter how weak the ability looked. When Chansu realized the card belonged to the Goddess of Abundance, his imagination ran wild. He pictured a beautiful, gentle goddess surrounded by flowers, smiling softly as if blessing him with good fortune. The image in his mind made his face turn red, and he even began drooling without noticing. Beside him, the rabbit stared blankly. The rabbit sighed and asked, in a tired tone, what exactly he was imagining this time. The rabbit stared at him in silence for a moment, clearly unsure of how to react to his expression. Then, with a small smile, it spoke gently and asked if he would like another chance. Chansu blinked in confusion. Just a moment ago the rabbit had said that was his last try. He hesitated, nervous. Then he quietly asked what would happen if he chose to keep the card he had now. The rabbit explained that if he decided to keep the card, then he would have to leave immediately. Hearing that, Chansu's eyes widened in surprise. He looked confused and asked if he really had to go right now. The rabbit spoke calmly, asking if there was any reason for him to hesitate. It explained that this was his chance to rise above being just a dispatcher and to become a returner. It said that if Chansu chose this path, everyone would admire him. People would cheer for him, look up to him, and speak his name with respect. They might even call him a savior. It told him to think carefully. If he chose this path, his life would change completely. A future unlike anything he had ever known would open up before him. Chansu lowered his head, deep in thought. He knew the rabbit's words were true. If he continued living like this, nothing would change. He would just keep struggling, stuck in the same place forever. Memories of his tiring life flashed in his mind, the endless work, the exhaustion, the feeling of going nowhere. He realized that he had to choose. If he wanted something different, he had to move forward. He had to make a decision. Just then, a bright message appeared before him, filled with glowing green light. It announced his choice. He would now serve the god of abundance. At the same moment, another message followed, saying that the form of his chosen god would be revealed. Soft petals floated through the air. Flowers bloomed all around him. A gentle light spread across the space. Then, from within that light, a beautiful figure slowly appeared. The goddess of abundance, graceful and serene, stepped forward, surrounded by the scent of blooming flowers. Chansu looked up in surprise, his eyes wide. The beautiful goddess stood before him, her presence calm and elegant. Her words seemed to echo gently in the air. Chansu stared in shock, struggling to understand what he had just seen. His voice trembled as he wondered if the figure from before was truly the goddess of abundance. After a moment, his expression changed. Hope filled his eyes, and a determined smile formed on his face. With the goddess supporting him, he felt like he could overcome anything. Chansu clenched his fist with excitement, filled with new confidence. He asked the rabbit guide where he needed to go next. The rabbit smiled warmly, pleased with his choice. Just then, a swirling purple portal opened in front of them, glowing with intense light. The rabbit guide calmly asked if they should begin the journey. Chansu panicked as the portal pulled him forward. He flailed his arms, trying to stop himself from falling in. The rabbit looked up at him, unfazed, and asked if something was wrong. Chansu stared nervously at the swirling portal. He pointed at it with an uneasy smile, unsure if they were really supposed to enter. To him, the portal seemed almost angry, as if it had a mood of its own. The rabbit, however, remained calm. It asked how something like that could even have emotions in the first place. The rabbit smiled gently and told him to look closely, saying the portal was beautiful. But Chansu was terrified. To him, the swirling vortex looked like a dangerous black hole, something no normal person would ever want to go near. Even though the portal looked dangerous and terrifying, Chansu stood firm. His hands were shaking, but he stepped forward with determination. He told himself that he would not run away anymore. He wanted to prove that he could do it, no matter how scary the path ahead seemed. With that resolve, he faced the portal head-on. Just as he was thinking, the little rabbit kicked him and sent him into the portal. He screamed as his body was dragged and spun into the swirling light. Chansu yelled in shock and anger, calling the rabbit names while flailing in the air, but the rabbit only watched calmly from behind, smiling quietly. Before Chansu disappeared into the portal, the rabbit said it would be waiting to see what he would become. After Chansu disappeared into the portal, a quiet voice echoed in the darkness, asking why the rabbit had done that. The rabbit lowered its head slightly and answered that the reason was already known. Direct intervention was forbidden. However, the voice insisted that they could not afford to lose Chansu, as if he was important. It questioned the rabbit, asking if it still had faith in its god. The rabbit stayed silent for a moment. Then, with a calm, steady tone, it replied, "Of course not." As Chansu landed in a new place, a glowing screen appeared in front of him. He stared at it with confusion, trying to understand what it meant. The screen displayed a percentage, slowly rising. Just then, another message appeared, explaining that the percentage showed how much influence a god had. Chansu's eyes widened. He had assumed it was just a chance or probability, but now he realized the truth. That number showed how strong a god was, based on how many followers and how much influence they had. His expression turned shocked and anxious. Then, his portal opened in the middle of a quiet, ruined field. From it, Chansu came crashing down, landing roughly on the ground. Dust rose around him as he sat up, holding his head in confusion and frustration. Moments earlier, he had learned that the percentage he saw was not a probability like he first believed. It was the measure of how much influence a god held. Realizing this truth, he let out a bitter sigh. He looked around. Broken stone pillars, crumbling structures and dried trees surrounded him. The place felt old, abandoned, and silent. Chansu sat there, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. A shaky laugh slipped out of him, followed by another, louder and more unsteady. His expression twisted as he tried to hold himself together, but the realization hit him all at once: he was completely doomed. Tears welled up in his eyes as panic finally broke through. He understood now just how hopeless his situation was. He had chosen a god with almost no influence at all. Chansu stared at the screen in disbelief, realizing just how unlucky he truly was. The place was said to be the land of the goddess of abundance. However, the land looked barren and lifeless. The temple stood in ruins with broken pillars and dried trees surrounding it. The person looking at it wondered how such a place could be connected to abundance. There was no sign of life or prosperity anywhere. A faint sound rang out behind him and Chansu turned to look. A glowing green system window suddenly appeared in front of him. He seemed confused and wondered what the system was trying to show now. The window displayed a message. It welcomed him to a world where land must be taken and controlled. It stated that Chansu had been chosen as a special apostle. His mission was to claim and secure as much land as he could. Chansu stared at the message, unsure of what was happening as the abandoned ruins stood silently behind him. Chansu stared at the glowing system window with a troubled expression. He wondered if the message appeared because his faction was too small. He looked annoyed, and a small sweat drop formed on his face. The system seemed to be pushing him to expand, even though he barely had anything to begin with. Chansu let out a small sigh. He decided that sitting around wouldn't help, so he began to move. He thought it would be better to look around the area first. As he walked through the ruins, he also wondered if he might be able to find the goddess somewhere nearby. As Chansu walked through the ruins, he suddenly heard a small sound. He stopped and looked down with a curious expression. There, lying on the ground, was a tool with a curved blade. He recognized it immediately. It was a sickle. Chansu picked up the sickle and looked at it closely. He wondered why a tool like this would be lying here in the ruins. Maybe someone had dropped it before. The sickle felt strangely familiar in his hand, almost comfortable to hold, but he was still unsure why it was here or what he was supposed to do with it. Chansu suddenly froze. In the distance, a dark shape with glowing eyes appeared, surrounded by a frightening purple aura. His face went pale and his body trembled. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. In front of him stood a monster. Fear rushed through him. He hadn't even found the goddess yet, and danger had already appeared. Chansu gripped the sickle tightly in his hand. His teeth clenched. He didn't want to die here. Not like this. Chansu gathered his courage and raised the sickle high. Fear was still in his eyes, but he refused to back down. If he couldn't escape, then he would at least try to scare the monster away. With a sudden swing, he slashed the air toward the creature. His movement was sharp and desperate, filled with determination. When Chansu swung the sickle, he paused in surprise. The frightening shadow he had seen before slowly came into view. His expression changed from fear to confusion. Standing there was not a monster at all. It was a small hamster. The hamster looked up at him with big teary eyes, shaking nervously. Its tiny body trembled as it let out a soft sound as if scared. Chansu leaned closer and looked at the small creature carefully. It was hard to believe that this trembling hamster was the monster he had been afraid of moments ago. It didn't look dangerous at all. In fact, it didn't seem hostile in the slightest. The hamster whimpered softly, its eyes watery as it stared up at him. Chansu paused for a moment, then a thought came to his mind. Even if the creature looked harmless, it was still considered a monster in this world. So maybe, if he caught it, he might earn some kind of reward. His eyes glinted with determination, and he slowly reached toward the trembling hamster. The small creature panicked and squeaked loudly in fear. Chansu relaxed a little and let out a sigh. He decided that as long as more of these creatures didn't show up, it wouldn't be a problem for now. He glanced at the hamster again. It was small, trembling, and honestly kind of cute. Holding his sickle loosely, Chansu gave a small smile. The hamster made a soft sound, still nervous but no longer trying to run. Chansu noticed the hamster suddenly start moving. It hurried forward with its tiny legs, wobbling as it went. Chansu blinked in surprise as he saw the hamster leaving. The hamster ran a short distance ahead, turning back and squeaking loudly. Chansu watched it, confused at first. He wondered what it was doing. Then as the hamster continued calling out to him, Chansu slowly realized something. It wasn't running away, it was trying to lead him somewhere. Chansu began running after the hamster. The small creature moved surprisingly fast, its tiny feet pattering across the ground. Chansu struggled to keep up, breathing heavily as he chased it. He couldn't believe how quick it was. Even though it was just a tiny ball of fluff, it was already far ahead of him. While running, he called out in frustration, wondering where the hamster was trying to lead him. The hamster suddenly let out a loud cry as it reached the edge of a clearing. Chansu, out of breath from chasing it, looked up. His eyes widened. Ahead of them was a small waterfall, crystal clear water flowing down the rocks. Sunlight sparkled off the surface, making it shine. It was fresh water, clean and drinkable. Chansu rushed to the water and drank quickly, scooping it up with his hands. The cool water felt amazing after everything he had been through. The hamster drank beside him as well, its tiny paws splashing in the stream. Chansu let out a satisfied breath and smiled. For the first time since he arrived here, he felt a bit of relief. Chansu sat down near the water, catching his breath. The sunlight filtered gently through the trees, making the place feel calm. He looked at the hamster beside him. He wondered if this was where the little creature lived. The surroundings were quiet and beautiful, but it didn't really seem like the kind of place a hamster should be living in. Still, the hamster seemed completely at home here. Chansu began speaking casually to the hamster, as if it could understand him. He wondered if the little creature might know something useful. He asked if it knew where the goddess was, the one he was supposed to meet. The hamster paused and blinked at him, tilting its head in confusion. Chansu tried to explain further, mentioning the goddess with the very noticeable figure. The hamster just squeaked softly in response, not seeming to understand at all. Chansu let out a small sigh. He realized the hamster probably couldn't understand him at all. Talking to it was pointless. But just then, the hamster suddenly squeaked loudly and flailed its tiny arms, as if trying to get Chansu's attention. Chansu blinked in confusion. It seemed like the little creature wanted him to follow again. He let out a small sigh, but he decided to go along with it. He stood up and began walking behind the hamster, curious about where it would lead him this time. Chansu followed the hamster through the forest. Soon they arrived in front of a massive tree that towered above everything else. Its trunk was twisted, and its leaves were faintly withered, drifting down with the wind. Chansu stopped and stared up at it with wide eyes. The tree looked ancient, grand, but weakened. He realized quietly that the huge tree had dried up over time. Chansu slowly reached his hand out and touched the surface of the tree. The bark felt dry and brittle, just like old trees back on Earth. As Chansu touched the tree, something on the ground moved. He paused and looked down in surprise. There, lying near his foot, was a piece of ginseng. It had a strange shape, almost like it was alive. Chansu blinked. He couldn't understand why something like ginseng would be found in a place like this. Seeing this, the hamster suddenly froze. Its eyes went wide, and it let out a loud, shocked squeal. It rushed over to the ginseng on the ground and held it tightly, as if crying. Chansu watched awkwardly from the side. He slowly scratched the back of his head, unsure what to say. He wondered if the ginseng belonged to the hamster. Just then, a glowing message appeared in front of Chansu's eyes. It said he had discovered the deity of the area. Chansu stared at the message in confusion. He scratched his head and tried to understand what it meant. He wondered where this supposed goddess was. The hamster suddenly clung tightly to Chansu's leg, crying out in a panic. Chansu flinched from the sudden movement and looked down in surprise. He gently picked the hamster up with one hand. The hamster kept squirming and waving its tiny paws. Chansu spoke calmly and said he was busy for the moment and would play later. However, the small hamster kept crying loudly while waving its tiny arms. Its eyes began to shine as if it was trying to say something urgently. Seeing this, Chansu froze, his eyes widening. He stared at the hamster in disbelief. His expression slowly changed to shock and confusion. It felt like he realized something important. He took a step back, his voice trembling. He wondered if the hamster wanted to say that the ginseng he just stepped on could be the goddess the message mentioned. Chansu looked down at the shriveled ginseng lying on the ground. It twitched slightly, his expression twisted in disbelief. He stared at the ginseng with wide, shaken eyes. The idea felt ridiculous, but the signs were pointing to it. He thought about how the goddess was described, full of life and abundance, but the ginseng in front of him looked dried out and weak. Chansu shook his head in denial. He couldn't accept that the goddess was actually this shriveled ginseng. Just then, a faint green light began to shine from the shriveled ginseng on the ground. Chansu stared at it with wide eyes, unable to believe what he was seeing. The light grew brighter, surrounding the ginseng like it was waking up. Chansu felt shocked and confused. To him, it still looked like an ordinary dried-up ginseng lying in the dirt. He remembered how the image of a beautiful goddess appeared in his mind before. She had long green hair, a flower crown, and a warm, graceful presence. Her white dress flowed like sunlight through leaves, and she looked peaceful and kind. But in reality, the contrast between the memory and what was in front of him felt unbelievable. He dropped to his knees, holding his head in disbelief. He stared at it with a tired expression. He realized the things he heard earlier about land and percentages were hinting at this moment all along. He remembered how the percentage numbers kept rising, even when he drew cards. Back then he assumed it was just a bug in the system. He now understood the truth. Those numbers were increasing because the deity's territory was spreading. At the time, he never imagined they were actually useful. The thought made him clench his teeth in frustration. He looked down at the shriveled ginseng with a troubled expression. He began to realize the truth. If the goddess's land and influence kept shrinking, then maybe her power faded with it. Because of that, the once beautiful goddess had become this dried-up form. Chansu looked up at the sky, worry showing on his face. He didn't understand why the goddess wasn't waking up. Beside him, the small creature whimpered softly, as if it was also concerned. Then Chansu froze as a sudden thought hit him. His eyes widened in shock. He wondered if he was the one who caused it. As if he had dealt the final blow that left the goddess in this weak state. Chansu nervously held his water bottle, unsure what to do. Since the goddess looked completely dried out, he thought maybe watering her might help. He opened the cap and slowly poured water over the shriveled ginseng on the ground. The ginseng began to glow softly with green light. Chansu's eyes lit up in surprise. It looked like the water was helping. Excited, he quickly poured even more water, thinking it would revive the goddess faster. The small creature beside him watched nervously while he continued to pour. As the water flowed down, the small ginseng felt relief. It felt refreshed after such a long time without water, but the flow kept getting stronger. The ginseng realized it was becoming too much. If the water continued like this, it would drown. Its eyes widened in panic. The ginseng struggled, looking like it was about to die. The ginseng began moving, showing signs of life again. Chansu's face brightened as he realized it had awakened. The small creature beside him cried out in relief and excitement. Chansu quickly straightened his posture. With a polite gesture, he introduced himself with sincerity. He said that his name was Chansu, the Apostle of Abundance. Chansu looked at the small ginseng with serious eyes. He believed this ginseng was his main deity, the one he was meant to serve. But as he watched her, the ginseng could barely move. Her tiny body wobbled weakly, dripping with water and shaking with effort. She looked exhausted, struggling just to lift her little arm. Chansu held his head and looked troubled. He didn't know what to do next. Then, a bright green system message appeared in front of him. It said that he could use skills to become stronger. Chansu stared at it blankly and realized something. He finally understood that there were skills he could use. Chansu looked at the glowing screen in front of him. He raised his hand and selected a skill. The first skill was called Blessing of Abundance. He understood that this skill made plants grow well. He then looked at the next skill. The screen displayed the words Blessing of Abundance, Behead. Chansu stared at it in confusion, repeating the word quietly to himself. Chansu stared at the word on the screen. If the skill meant behead, then it meant cutting off someone's head. He imagined what that would look like. A guillotine appeared in his mind, and he trembled in fear. He wondered if this was really what abundance meant. The thought made him even more nervous. Chansu stared at the screen again. He wondered why the goddess of abundance would give a skill that seemed so violent. He looked down at the small ginseng goddess. He nervously asked if the behead skill really meant what he thought it did. The ginseng goddess stared back at him with a calm expression. She nodded. Chansu looked nervous as he pointed to himself. He asked if the skill was really telling him to chop off heads. The ginseng goddess closed her eyes and crossed her arms. She didn't say anything, but her expression looked serious. Chansu began thinking seriously. He remembered that the goddess of abundance was connected to farming and agriculture. He looked up the meaning of agriculture. It talked about growing crops and raising animals. Chansu slowly nodded to himself. He wondered if that also included butchering animals. Chansu paused for a moment. He turned around slowly as a thought came to him. A small cheerful hamster was happily dancing beside him without a care. Chansu stared at it in silence. Looking at the hamster, he wondered if butchering counted as part of abundance. Then even this small animal was included. Chansu held a sickle in his hand. His expression was dark, while the hamster continued smiling, not realizing anything. The small hamster looked up with a happy expression and made a soft squeak. Chansu stood in front of it, holding the sickle. His face was shadowed, and he apologized quietly. He raised the sickle above his head. He said that he couldn't avoid his role as an apostle. The hamster's eyes widened in shock. It squeaked loudly in fear. The hamster quickly turned and ran with a panicked expression. It squeaked loudly as it tried to escape. The ginseng goddess looked surprised as the hamster rushed behind her. Both of them trembled together in fear. Chansu walked toward them. He said that he didn't want to do this either. But he said it was all for the goddess. The hamster and the ginseng goddess were huddled together, shaking in fear. Both of their eyes were wide and teary. Chansu looked shocked as he watched the hamster and ginseng goddess run away together. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. Suddenly, a large shadowy figure appeared behind him. Its glowing eyes stared down, and its body rose like smoke. Chansu slowly turned around. The air around them became tense and heavy. The hamster stood in front of the ginseng goddess, trying to act brave. Its face was red and determined, even though it was still shaking. It squeaked loudly. Chansu looked at them and realized something. He understood that the creature wasn't a monster after all. He admitted to himself that he had been mistaken. Chansu looked ahead with a worried expression. He understood that he had to fight the dark, ghost-like creature instead. The shadowy figure stood in front of him, glowing eyes staring straight at him. Chansu wondered if he could really win this fight. However, he dismissed those thoughts and ran toward the dark creature with determination. He told himself he had to fight. His eyes focused sharply. He could see the weak point clearly. He looked straight at the monster and understood where he needed to strike. Just then, a system message appeared in front of him, telling him he could use the skill Decapitation. Chansu swung his weapon with all his strength. The slash cut through the air and struck the dark creature. He jumped forward and aimed straight at the monster from above. Seeing this, the hamster and ginseng goddess watched with wide, shocked eyes. The dark creature's body broke apart. Its shadowy form scattered and disappeared into the air. After killing the dark creature, Chansu ran toward them and asked if they were okay. The little hamster stood there, shaking and blushing. Chansu looked at it and realized something. He understood that, even for a moment, the small hamster had protected the ginseng goddess. Chansu dropped to the ground and bowed his head. He apologized, saying he had made a foolish mistake. The hamster and ginseng goddess were startled. Chansu looked up and asked if they would forgive him. The hamster raised its tiny paw and gave a thumbs up. Chansu's face lit up with relief. He thanked the hamster. The hamster squeaked and looked up at him. Chansu smiled and said he had also thought of a name. He explained that they would need a name if they were going to live together from now on. The hamster's eyes sparkled, and it became very happy. It pressed its little hands together and squeaked softly. Just then, a glowing system message appeared in front of him. It said that because of the skill's effect, the head would be automatically transferred. It marked the first count of the immortal Oni hunt. Chansu looked at the glowing message and realized the monster's name was Immortal Oni. He thought that the name sounded scary for something that was defeated so easily. Another message appeared. It said that the transferred tribute would now be connected to the goddess. Chansu turned around when he noticed something. The ginseng goddess was glowing and sparkling brightly. Chansu looked surprised and called out to the goddess. He noticed that the ginseng goddess's skin looked smoother now. Chansu smiled brightly. He said that if they continued doing this, the goddess would return to her original beautiful form. Chansu became excited and started running forward. He said he would hunt more for the goddess. The small plant creature waved its leaves happily. The hamster tried to follow after him, squeaking as it ran. Chansu walked forward into a darker area of the forest. The trees there were bare, and the ground looked cold and empty. Several immortal Oni stood among the trees, watching him silently. Chansu stopped when a system message appeared and explained the point. Chansu looked at the screen with surprise. He asked when he even got those points. However, this was not the time to think about that. The immortal Oni were surrounding him. So first, he needed to get rid of them. He held his weapon in his hand. He thought that it was lucky he had a skill. He also thought that the skill was strong and not difficult to use. Chansu began to move quickly. He knew that the immortal Oni were very slow, so he could kill them easily. Chansu moved quickly with his weapon, cutting through the mud monsters one after another. Black pieces of their bodies scattered as he struck them. Just then, a system message appeared and explained that monsters must be hunted to earn points. Chansu smiled with determination. Sweat was on his face, and the small hamster held onto his shirt. He said it was good news. Then he said they would start by catching 100 of the monsters. Sometime later, after hunting 100 immortal Oni, Chansu started going back to the ginseng goddess. The hamster on his shoulder suddenly stood up and squeaked loudly with pride. Chansu smiled. He said that if someone saw them, they might think the hamster was the one who did all the work. The hamster looked angry and started hitting his shoulder. Chansu laughed and told it to stop. However, one thing he was curious about was why the monster was called Immortal Oni, since it was defeated so easily. But he dismissed this thought, thinking he would probably understand more if he kept hunting. After Chansu returned, he saw the ginseng goddess glowing brightly. She looked healthier and more lively than before. Chansu smiled and blushed as he watched her shine. He thought that the effect was better than he expected. He felt excited, thinking that at this pace she might return to her true form soon. Chansu looked at the ginseng goddess and asked what they should do next. They both stood in front of a huge golden tree, its leaves glowing softly. Chansu looked at the ginseng goddess again. He asked if he should place her up in the tree. Chansu held the ginseng goddess in his hand and looked up at the tall tree. The ginseng goddess reached out and touched the tree's surface. Then she motioned toward Chansu and asked him to touch the tree's surface too. Chansu placed his hand on the tree beside the ginseng goddess. Just then, a system message appeared, telling him he could use a skill called Blessing of Plenty. Another message said that all blessings use points. Chansu looked calm and focused, and used the skill Blessing of Plenty. A bright green light surrounded Chansu. He focused and remembered the points he earned from hunting monsters. He decided to use all of them. Chansu raised his hand and poured all the points into the Blessing of Plenty, sending a strong glowing energy toward the tree. The leaves on the tree began to shine softly. Light particles flowed across the branches, and the tree rustled gently. The tree became full of bright green leaves and fresh fruit. Chansu stood in front of the tree, breathing heavily. He looked up with surprise. He held the ginseng goddess in his arms, and both of them seemed shocked. His eyes widened as he saw the tree. There was a bright red fruit hanging among the leaves. It was an apple. Chanshu picked the apple from the tree. He held it in both hands and stared at it with wide eyes. The apple was large and shiny, bigger than any normal apple he had seen. His face showed surprise and disbelief as he looked at it closely. Chansu looked at the apple and closed his eyes for a moment. He held back the urge to eat it right away. Then he knelt down in front of the ginseng goddess. He lifted the apple with both hands. He said that he would offer the first harvest to the goddess. The ginseng goddess happily hugged the big apple. He looked at the ginseng goddess and hoped she would return to how she used to be one day. But he also thought that her current form was very cute. Just then, the ginseng goddess suddenly grabbed the apple tightly. Chansu looked at her in surprise. The ginseng goddess began to absorb the apple, her body shaking and changing shape. Chansu stood frozen, watching. When it finished, the ginseng goddess looked satisfied, while Chansu stared in shock. He wondered how she could absorb the apple like that. Chansu looked up at the tree and quickly climbed it. He picked several apples while thinking he should not upset the ginseng goddess. Then Chansu came down carrying the apples in his arms. He called out to the little hamster, asking it to eat together. The hamster happily squeaked and ran toward him. He remembered that the ginseng goddess had given him a dangerous skill before, so he thought he should be careful. But when he took a bite of the apple, his thoughts changed. He and the hamster both ate with happy faces. They smiled and enjoyed the taste. The apple tasted extremely good, and he couldn't stop himself from eating more. The ginseng goddess hid behind a tree and watched quietly. Chansu sat on the ground and kept eating the apples happily, making excited sounds. The ginseng goddess looked at him, surprised. She couldn't believe that in one day, Chansu had hunted monsters and made a giant tree grow. She stared at Chansu, wondering where a monster like him came from. The land of abundance was the one responsible for food. It was known as a strong and important place because it produced high-quality crops. However, as corruption started to take over other groups, its power grew stronger. The sky turned dark and red, and the trees became lifeless. Crows sat on the branches while the air felt heavy. Skeleton-like beings appeared, holding weapons and moving forward. Because of this strong force, abundance could not fight back and had to escape. To stay alive, abundance stopped their normal work and started hunting monsters. They went into the forest with tools and tried to fight a large beast. But the people of abundance were not trained for battle. They were scared and unprepared. The monster attacked them and they could not win even a single fight. As their final option, they changed their basic skill called harvest into a new skill called beheading, trying to make it stronger for battle. But even with this change, abundance could not survive. In the end, abundance was destined to fall. The skill beheading was not actually meant for fighting or cutting off the heads of living monsters. It was only changed so they could at least bring back the heads of dead animals or monsters. Abundance and warriors simply did not go together, so this was the only thing they could manage. However, if someone from abundance was extremely strong, then using the skill in battle might not be impossible. But in reality, most of them were not strong enough. Chansu held the small sickle in his hand, his eyes focused and serious. The ginseng goddess, who was hiding nearby, suddenly shook in surprise. Chansu walked toward her with a small smile. He asked politely if he could have more apples. The ginseng goddess let out a tired sigh. She wondered to herself why a child like Chansu had come to her. While Chansu climbed the apple tree to harvest more apples, the ginseng goddess watched him carefully and thought to herself that, no matter what, this child now belonged to her. She rushed forward to Chansu and wrapped her small arms around his leg, holding on tightly. She decided in her heart that she would not let anyone else take him. Chansu held an apple with a nervous expression. He looked unsure and began to sweat a little, wondering if the ginseng goddess was planning to absorb him. Sometime later, after harvesting enough apples, Chansu walked through the quiet forest back to his place, with a basket full of apples hung from his back. The ginseng goddess was quietly clinging to him as he walked. Soon the ginseng goddess fell asleep in his hands. She looked soft and tired, breathing gently. Chansu spoke softly, saying that the goddess must have been very tired. He carefully placed her down, making sure not to wake her. Chansu smiled gently and told the small hamster that it had worked hard today as well. The hamster made a small squeak and rubbed against his finger. Suddenly, a loud sound burst through the air. Chansu flinched in shock, his face turning red. The hamster also jumped in surprise. Chansu looked around in confusion. He wondered why there was thunder when the sky was clear. He hoped the noise did not wake the ginseng goddess. But suddenly, Chansu held his stomach with a troubled face. He looked tired and weak. He thought to himself that eating only apples was starting to hurt his stomach. He realized that apples alone were not enough for him to stay well. Then suddenly, a system message appeared in front of him. The message stated that a delivery event was happening. Chansu blinked in surprise, not understanding what it meant. He looked at the glowing message in his hand and read it calmly. It said there was a special event happening. He thought that since many things from Earth were appearing here, it made sense that even events like this existed. He was a little surprised that the world was running events like a game. Chansu then wondered if a delivery could really reach him. He said that they would need to know exactly where he was in order to deliver anything. Chansu looked at the small hamster lying tiredly on his shoulder. He smiled softly and said that the hamster must be very tired. He suggested that they should sleep first. The hamster slowly closed its eyes, already falling asleep. Chansu then walked toward where the ginseng goddess was resting. He gently placed leaves over her like a blanket. He spoke in a quiet, caring voice, telling her to cover herself and sleep comfortably. Then the scene shifts to a tall and grand building called the Temple of Circulation. Inside the building, a woman walks confidently down the hallway. People standing around watch her as she passes by. Their eyes follow her. Inside the temple office, a man was working while looking over some documents. Suddenly, the office door burst open loudly. He jumped in shock and turned to look. The woman from before stood in the doorway, looking upset. He stared at her with surprise and asked why she was here and what happened with the delivery. She walked closer and spoke to him, asking if he was messing with her right now. The woman tried to speak while trying to control her frustration. She said she didn't understand what he was talking about and told him to calm down. But she also said she was already overwhelmed with work, and none of this made any sense to her. She is Hai Sujin, apostle of circulation. Hai Sujin looked at the request and raised her voice in disbelief. She said it was a restricted area and the trip would take 2 nights and 3 days. She reminded him that because of the free shipping event, they wouldn't even earn any money from it. The man flinched as she scolded him. She pointed at him angrily. She said he was surviving only on apples, and now the people on the other side wanted to trade more apples because they had no money. She couldn't believe how ridiculous the situation was. Hai Sujin slammed her hands on the desk and asked if she had done something wrong. The man coughed lightly and shook his head. He said she didn't do anything wrong. In fact, it was the opposite. He explained that their junior was just too passionate about work. The man told her that he also liked working, but if she kept working overtime every single day, her body would not last. He said she should take a break. Even if the break came in the form of a business trip, it would still be better than working non-stop. The man told her that if she stayed in the office, she would return to work again the moment she finished. He placed a hand on her shoulder gently. He suggested that she should take some time to cool her head and rest for a while. Hae-soo-jin clenched her fists and said she already knew the reason. She knew no one else wanted to go on the trip. The man scratched his head with an awkward smile. He admitted she caught him. He placed his hands on her shoulders and tried to cheer her up. He said that maybe if she went, she might even find a hidden realm. She muttered that there was no hidden realm waiting. If anything, she would probably just freeze to death out there. The man waved to her and told her to travel safely. He added that maybe something good might happen when she came back. Hae-soo-jin sighed with a tired face. She finally gave in and said she would go. She walked away while he waved goodbye. Hae-soo-jin looked at the order list and was surprised by how long it was. She reminded herself that since she was going to a restricted area, she had to prepare properly. She clenched her hand and hoped that all this effort would not be wasted. Her eyes became firm. She told herself that she would not just sit and do nothing. She would face it head-on. Meanwhile, Chansu harvested all the apples and gathered them into baskets placed all around the ground. While he was collecting the apples, the little hamster was playing hide-and-seek. Looking around, he called the hamster and told it that he could see its hair. Behind one of the baskets, the hamster was trying hard not to laugh. Its cheeks were puffed up and it squeaked. Chansu, however, could already hear it laughing. He looked down at the bitten apple on the ground and spoke calmly, saying that he could hear it laughing from there. He slowly approached with a playful yet scary smile. He asked where the little creature was hiding, pretending not to know. The small hamster tried to stay still, but its expression showed that it had been found. Chansu leaned closer and asked if it was hiding behind the apples. Suddenly, he grabbed the hamster by the body. The hamster let out a loud, high-pitched scream as it was lifted into the air. Chansu lifted the small hamster up with both hands and smiled brightly. He said that he finally caught the little troublemaker. The hamster squeaked loudly in his hands. Chansu reminded it that he had already told it not to nibble on the apples. Instead of helping, the hamster had been secretly eating them. He reminded it that the apples were not meant to be eaten. They were supposed to be used for trade. He asked what he was supposed to do if this kept happening, especially since someone important was coming to visit today. Chansu let out a small sigh. He thought to himself that the visitors were coming from far away, so he couldn't make a bad impression the first time they met. According to information he learned earlier when applying for the delivery event, in this world the land is divided into areas called blocks. Right now a special event was happening, the blocky land-grabbing Grand Summon event. The land looked normal at first glance, but around the edges there was a faint shining wall that separated one block from another. To move from one block of land to another, a person needed a daily movement ticket. Without it, they could not travel between blocks. The area around him had nothing at all. His block was marked as 36N, 10E, and it showed only a few apple trees. The nearest village was so far away that it would take about a week to reach it. He looked at the apples and thought that he almost ended up eating only apples every day. He felt relieved that more supplies were coming. He said it was amazing that delivery arrived in just 2 days. He didn't know how the delivery system worked, but he was grateful for it. He lay down on the ground and looked up at the sky. He just hoped that the sleeping bag he ordered would arrive soon. He also mentioned that he ordered a cushion for the little goddess. Hearing that, the ginseng goddess happily jumped and smiled. Looking at the goddess, Chansu reminded himself quietly that if he didn't want to dry up and become a mummy, he needed to slowly raise her favorability little by little. But just then, a strange sound echoed from the forest. Chansu quickly stopped and turned his head. The hamster on his shoulder also looked in the same direction. He grabbed the handle of his weapon without hesitation. He thought to himself that this world even delivered monsters. In fact, since yesterday, the monsters had been coming toward his land on their own. Ahead of him, several dark, ghost-like shapes slowly approached through the trees. He looked at the monsters approaching and realized they really were undead. Just like the rumors said, the correct word for them was probably reviving. He prepared himself and spoke calmly, saying that no matter what those things were, he decided he would take them down. He rushed forward with quick movement. His weapon swung in a clean arc, cutting through the approaching undead monsters. Suddenly, the small hamster on his shoulder squeaked in shock. Seeing this, Chansu turned his head and saw an immortal Oni raise its hand and attack him. A bright slash of light hit the ground. However, Chansu quickly jumped back and avoided it. He narrowed his eyes and noticed that the monsters were moving a little faster than before. He wondered in his thoughts if monsters could grow stronger over time, just like skills did. He stepped forward again. He thought to himself that even if the monsters had become stronger, it was only a little. He swung his blade in fast, clean arcs. The dark monsters were cut apart one after another. The monsters' bodies broke apart and scattered into small glowing pieces. He stood in the middle of the clearing, holding his weapon, letting out a small breath as the glowing fragments floated around him. Haisujin, who came to deliver the goods, looked down at him with wide eyes. She was shocked by what she had just seen. In her mind, she thought it was insane.